sometimes things don't really work out the way we want them to, and it can be really frustrating. That's kind of what I've gone through this past couple of days as I've been developing the next evolution of the system and putting in an experience value to the tasks that we're doing. Now, if you're just joining us for the first time, this is episode 3 of a series in which I'm developing an RPG-like interface for my Notion that I'm going to be turning into a product later down the line. So, in that, I'm playing around with different mentalities and psychology, mainly gamification, to try and use techniques that help me both trick my brain into doing the things I want to do, but also making it engaging and make me actively want to do the things. Because I know logically the things that I want to be doing. But to get to the stage where that is something that I'm motivated to do is that stage and bridge that I'm trying to connect. As part of this, if you haven't seen the previous episodes, I've been using a framework called the Octalysis framework, in which there is 8 core drivers that help gamify different elements to make people want to play them more. Now in this episode, mainly I'm going to be focusing on the development and accomplishment elements. So these are the ones that want us to show that we're making progress in the things that we're doing, but also show that there is so much more that we can do down the line. And to utilize this, I wanted to kind of integrate a very core mechanic in most games, and that is the idea of leveling, the idea of experience, taking that and bunching up into a certain amount of numbers so that when you hit that number, you go to the next level. And as you do, you level up. And again, previously I've mentioned that I found the concept of leveling up a little bit gimmicky, so I tried to make that a way in which it wasn't, oh, you're now like this sort of thing, and it feeling like it isn't earned properly. I want it to be a system that, although is still relying on that level up aspect. It's not, oh, I'm level 7, what level are you? It's more of a tracker of, here's how far you've come and here's how far we have to go. So when I first started looking into this, I just started trying to outline the core different values of what we were going to be using. Now, at the base level, there are some ones like, how much experience do I have? What is the experience worth? How hard is it to get experience? What values do I actually allow the experience to be connected to? Is it the harder a task is, or the more tasks that get done? Another aspect is actually the levels. At what point does the experience gratify you with a new level? And how do we make it so that that level continually becomes a harder task as you go on without it seeming so extreme that it's going to take 7 years to do the thing it did like one day at the beginning? So let's start there. When I was looking at the idea of levels, I wanted to reference a bunch of different games and how they utilize the amount of experience gained in order to get to the next level. And a lot of these games, there is an exponential curve, one that starts here, and as it goes further along time, it does get harder to level up. You don't want it to be the same amount per level, because then you just start racking up a number that's just going, I've done this same amount of tasks this amount of times. I want it to be, as you level up, it does get harder. But you also have that showing of, well, here is the amount of work I've done. I've gotten to this point. I can continually do this because it shows that I have done it before, and that means that I can do it again. And again, relying on that whole identity-based thing, the idea being that you want to do the actions that are congruent with the identity that you have made. Congruency is basically, if you say you are one thing, chances are you'll do the actions that align with you saying that you are that thing. So with this in mind, I started developing a system, and I started playing around with like, oh, okay, well, you need this amount of experience to connect to this amount of levels. And using Notion, I played around with the formulas. In particular, there was one that I was using to create the level up structure, so that each level, it required a certain amount of experience to get to the next one. And then that amount would then level up as you go on to get harder and harder. The way I did this was by using an exponential. So this is where you see like a number and then a little number in the top right hand corner. That is a number to the power of that. The amount of times that number is times by itself. So I was using a number which is 1.5. So this way it has a level of experience that does need to be gained each time, but every time you do that, it takes that amount you had, adds it, and then adds a little bit more. So it doesn't become this sort of ongoing same. It does have that challenge to it. But little did I know that with Notion's formulas, and please, if anyone knows the solution to this, correct me, because I couldn't find a way that I could also divide by the power of. Notion has an amazing system for timesing by the power of, but I couldn't find one or figure out one in my head, how to divide by that same power of. Long story short, I created a roundabout system that used many different aspects to get these values. But when I tried to then reverse it and going, okay, well, if I have this amount of experience, I am this level, it started to break down because I needed that dividing system. So I needed to think of another way, and that came in the form of going, well, what about if I wasn't just relying on one singular database? I was using multiple databases and having them kind of talk to each other. I use the relation property to connect the amount of experience to another aspect that goes, okay, do you have this amount of experience? That means that you're at this level. And again, this is all technicalities, and there's a reason why I'm not showing it to you, because it started to get into this loop. A loop that I didn't know Notion had. Notion has a level of security, which makes complete sense when you realize what could happen if a closed loop happens. What I mean by that is if one property is relying on another property, which is relying on a third property, and one is trying to talk to two, which is then talking to three, which is then talking to one. If there is no stop point, that is a mathematical equation that will keep going on and on and on and on and on, take up so much server database power that it would shut down the servers. If you're a company like Notion, or anyone who is hosting something online, you do not want this. This is a huge programming error, and thankfully there are things in place for Notion so that that doesn't happen. I just wish I knew that before I started one that was 11 relations deep and didn't work. Notion has a limitation as well, where it's you can only have 7 relations. You can only rely on something 7 times before the equation stops running. And this I could not understand for the longest time because I kept going, why does this break? Logically, it's making sense. Let's say I have 100 checkboxes and 2 of them are unclicked. And I'm going, show me the amount or percentage of the unchecked boxes. And it said 0, even though very clearly it had 2. And I was frustrated. I could not understand why my logic wasn't working. And that's because I didn't understand this core ability of Notion to go, hey, no, don't do that because it will ruin our servers. And so, because of my stupidity, I kept pushing, trying to find another way to do it, until eventually I got this. Now, if you've ever seen this page, chances are, small error, you refresh a couple times and it comes back. Not with the page I was making, because it was a database that was relying on so many different aspects and created multiple closed loops. It was running so many algorithms trying to get different values and then connecting those values, and because of that, it was overloading the requests to the server. So, what Notion does is they just stop the page. And yes, this is frustrating. The idea that I couldn't access this one database very, very long. Where it got me was I had hosted that database in my main tracker. Now, this is why you have backups, folks. But I had hosted this database in the aspect where I was keeping track of everything I was doing. All my progress from weeks and weeks and weeks of testing, I couldn't access. Thankfully, I realized you can just delete certain aspects of a page if you go into the menu on the left. But for a good 2 hours, I was distraught. I couldn't think of what to do other than just... mentally, I could not comprehend why it wasn't working because I didn't understand the whole Notion overflow and not allowing that. Now, I do not blame Notion for this at all. They have their servers and security in place so that these things don't happen and shut it down for everyone. That's effectively what a DDoS attack is. Notion did their job. That's awesome to see. But it was heartbreaking. And then I just kind of decided, well, if this is going to be the way it is, I could complain. I could just decide to chuck all this out the window. But then I remembered the through line of the reason why I'm doing this. To take a step back, look at the fundamentals of what I was doing, question everything that I thought true, so that I know going forward the things that I'm doing are the correct things. And one of those beliefs was questioned. Is something worth doing even after losing it all? And in this circumstance, I could give up on this project, sure. But the through line of underneath it being, this is me trying to make a living off of my passions. I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about making a system where I get to track my progress, improve, and then also share that value to other people. That's important to me. And it was confirmed because I realized that I didn't want to give up. I wanted to continue with this project. And so I decided to delete that other database completely and start again from scratch. Start again from developing a user profile that was not as perfectly developed. In fact, there was nothing there. I had to start again. But now I can show you that I have this. So you are now looking at my new update. So I've just hidden my side quest because that's still a little bit of a mess. I'm still refining that. But I still have the same quest system in showing the main quest. But now I have this little thing up here. Previously, I just had a picture that was somewhat related to the idea of making progress and following a quest line and all that. But now I have my player avatar. And what this is simple values. Has a profile picture, which allows the customization of your character. You can name it up here. It shows you your level, the amount of experience that you have in relation to the next level as well, and a progress bar. Now, these are all in relation to different values. Previously, when I mentioned that I could use multiple databases to connect the different aspects that are checking on each other, I realized that was the core of what caused the problems because it was that relation aspect. But in stopping to think about the simplification of it, keeping it to a minimum amount of things needed, I can really start to see how we can connect these aspects. And because of that, I have some extra details. And as you can see, when you first look at it, very overwhelming. There's a lot of numbers and you don't really know what's happening. But the basis of it is, there's a single other database that is collecting the amount of experience you have, and then interpreting that, going, hey, here's where they are, here's where the next level is, and because of that, they're at this level. So let's have a look at what that database actually is. If we go back to the main part, you can see down here, I have levels, experience, and player. Player was the database you were just looking at, the idea of where you will actually access your user data. But in experience, you'll see that I have the tasks complete. Now we'll get back to this. Note, experience is effectively the amount of tasks you've completed, the value they're worth, and then adding that to your overall experience. Now where a lot of the math goes down is in levels. And you see here that I have levels 1 through to 100. And as you can see, each of these has an experience value that is depicted via a mathematical equation. Again, I'm using that aspect of, okay, if we have 1,000 as the base level, and then every time we level up, we take that previous number and then times it by itself by the power of 1.5. We get 1,000, 2,800, 5,200. Now again, it's not actually that number. I had to round so it's just a cleaner number because otherwise it looks way too complicated. Having numbers like this where it's just the last two digits no matter what are always 2 zeros, it relies on that marketing idea of just having cleaner numbers and therefore seeming like it's better thought out versus 11249 or something like that, where it just doesn't feel right. But the basis of the way this works is, in here, it has a relation to your character. The character sheet is there, and from there, it is getting the current experience value. That's what we saw at the beginning. We saw that experience that was being developed, and from that, we are then taking that number and putting it here. What we do next is we take that value and we see if it is greater than the amount of experience that we have over depicted by the level. So right now, 1,600 is above 1,000, so therefore, it is not the same level. And with that, we can create this other value, where it's going, hey, if this box is ticked, share that number here. So, we're not sharing 1,000 because we're past that level. That's not what we need to do next. The next level we want to get to is 2,800. Because of that, our level is 2, because the first one is not ticked. And again, the math behind this, I will not burden you with. If you want to see that, again, sign up down below to get early access to this and we can go through a testing phase where you can have a look at all this. You can play around, you can break it. But again, I'm not going to show you in this because that will get very boring for a lot of people. I'm going through the broad strokes here. And once I had that, I can go back to my quests and see that I had a level, I had an experience. You start at level 0, you start at 0 experience. So how do you actually get that? And that's where I came up with my little quest system. I relied on that system I was already using, but now I've connected it with a button that says Finish Task. What this task does, it simply takes that top level task that I defined via the importance vector. If you don't know what that is, go a couple videos back and I showed a rough version of what my task system looks like at the moment. And so it takes that top value, the one that's being shown below. It goes, okay, mark it as done, but also give it a connection to this other database. That database being experience. And in that, it creates a thing where it just says task complete, and then it takes the experience reward. Now, what is the experience reward? Basically, it is a value that is defined in the actual quest saying, hey, here is the prioritization, that number 1 through 5. Take that value, times it by a certain amount, and then check to see if it's a main quest or a side quest, times it by 2 if it's a main quest, and then you have your value. What that does then is it then creates this little entry. It's a row in a database that just has all the levels in relation to that. Again, we don't need to look at all that. What we're looking at is just this number 800. Now, that's the amount of experience that task gave because it was a level 5 priority, first task in the main quest. It was a lot of different math. But because of that, I can now get the roundup of how many of these entries are made. I can have 700 entries, but what it will do is we'll take all of them And in the actual quests, it will add it together and give me my experience. And what this does is it actually adds it together and gives me experience, but without loading the servers so much that it breaks it. And the joy I felt when it started working was astronomical. I felt so proud that I had this, effectively, moment where I could have very easily given up, like I have many times before. But I realized that this was important. I stuck to it, I started playing around, and now I have a system that's really working, which means I can move on to the next stage. And that means that I'm done with this video. This video is done because I've made the experience system. Now, if you want to see the next couple stages, feel free to subscribe down below. I'll be releasing these videos 2 times a week, and hopefully this will be up and running into a testing stage very soon. If you want to get access to that, feel free to sign up by the link in the description, and that way you can come along and actually try out the testing phase of this before it becomes a full-on product that I actually get to give to people and go, hey, here is what I've made. So, again, if that sounds of interest to you, link in the description, but otherwise, I will love to see you along for the next part of the journey, and hopefully we can all level up together.